Hey folks, Tom Vasel here, and today we're going to be taking a look at my top 10 favorite political games. Now, political games, you know, the term can be stretched pretty loosely, but what I'm going to be talking about here are games that basically have to do with politics in some fashion or form and have at least their basis in reality. I'm not saying the game can't be fantastical in how people apply the politics, but like I'm not doing fantasy politics, for example. These are politics that could or have happened. So without further ado, let's get to the list. Number 10, we have Founding Fathers. Now, this is a game about the Constitution of the United States of America and the men who put it together. And what I really like about this game is a decent game. It's not a great game, but it's a very historically based game in which players are making the Constitution, and it has two different parts of the Constitution, and you're trying to get a certain part into play. And I like that because it has that good historical flavor. It takes some of the very famous mechanisms from Twilight Struggle in 1960. It's done by the same guys, and I don't think it does so in as good of a way, but there really isn't any other game about the Constitution. It's a very neat part of history, and the flavor certainly is large in this one. Number 9 is a very weird game, Europa 1945 to 2030. It has a very strange cover, but the game is about players trying to convince different members of Europe to join the EU, the European Union. And so you are doing that as the game progresses, as time goes by, more can join. And you're doing so in a little bit of an area control method. It's interesting, especially since when the game was made and how much has changed in Europe since then. I mean, pretty soon we'll be talking about this game and it will be 2030. But again, I think this game didn't sell well because of the cover, and when you play it, it's kind of like, okay, you want to control areas, and you're kind of fighting each other back and forth, but you're all kind of doing a common thing, getting people to join the Union, but it's intriguing nonetheless. Number 8 is Road to the White House. Now, Road to the White House is not a great game. But I find it a fascinating one that I enjoy because the theme is so strong. There's a lot of games about running for president, but the American system is a little odd in how it works with the electoral system. Well, this takes that and just runs with it. You get candidates who have all sorts of extreme views on different opinions, although since the game came out 20 plus years ago, the opinions are starting to become a little dated in it, but that's okay. You still can get behind these candidates, although sometimes the opinions are like, yeah, this guy's kind of racist. I don't really want to be that guy. But I do like the very caricature nature of it, and yet at the same time, it brings a lot of different things together. I think I would like to see this one reprinted with some streamlining of the rules, but I can have a lot of fun, and I find this one to be a very good teaching tool. Number 7 is Corporate America. Now, this one is another kind of parody on politics in general. You're using politics in this game to make things that will make your companies do better. And that's why it's called Corporate America. Obviously, you want laws in place and things in place that will make your companies progress farther. Now, this is very cynical and maybe not the way politics should be. I should say maybe, definitely not the way politics should be. But it does make for an intriguing, interesting game. This game came off of Kickstarter, and some fun therein. Number 6 is Liberté. This is a game from Martin Wallace and covers the tumultuous period of the French Revolution. What makes this game fascinating is there's different ways that you can win. You can win basically by the royals staying in power and consolidating that, by a rebellion taking over, or just by getting the most points. But there's 3 factions, and you're trying to have enough power in these different 3 factions. You want to have the power in a faction that actually wins. There's wars going on the side, but it's basically about politics and controlling things. I think the theming of this game is very strong. It's not for everybody because it can feel a little bit chaotic, but at the same time, that chaos has a point. The actual revolution was very chaotic, but there is some control in there, and I think a very unique and intriguing game. That's Liberté. Number 5 is Kremlin. Hey, making fun of the communist politics of the 80s, and this game does that full force. Basically, here you are just maneuvering to have your guy being able to wave at people. I designed a game called Nothing Personal, which much of the idea of that game was derived from Kremlin because I liked it. This game has not aged well. It was reprinted last year, but there's still some kind of funky mechanisms where you're writing down support and things that you have, and a little bit more complex than it should be, but it brings out that communist flavor. This back and forth backstabbery, it's not even just communist anywhere, leadership, and has very fun caricatures, although you can play with a set of real people too. I think it's more fun with the caricatures. People are getting old, they're getting sick, you're sending people off to Siberia, the KGB is coming through. This is back and forth trying to control people for political office. Number 4 is another game from Jason Matthews, and that is 1960. This takes a look at the election between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy, which was very close, and you control one of those candidates, and it's a simple 2-player game where you're trying to go around to different states, and you have different things, and you're going to fight for over to different states, and you're trying to come out on top. The game is very well balanced. It introduces the famous first time I believe people were on TV for a TV debate. Different events will show up. It uses some mechanisms that came from the very famous Twilight Struggle, but made it simpler and easier for people to play. Again, I think the American electoral system is not something that's very simple to understand, but this game kind of helps that a little bit, abstracts it out some, and it's a very fun playing experience. 1960. Number 3 is Die Macher. I don't really understand how elections work in Germany, but this game does brings it out a little bit. And Die Macher is not a light game. We're talking about a 3 to 4 hour heavy Euro-style game in which players are trying to work with other players and work against them and use TV and advertisement and different things to advance their political agendas, which can change often during the course of the game. You change your political agenda to match what the people want. And so there's a lot going back and forth. But it is a very involved game and very heavy on both tactics and strategy. The first time I played this, I was kind of overwhelmed, but also overjoyed to be in such a game that I was kind of fascinated with the entire time. It is indeed a long game, but it is a long game that grips you all the way through and is grounded in some political reality. That's Die Macher. Number 2 is 1989 Dawn of Freedom. This was designed as a kind of a follow-up to Twilight Struggle. The designer worked with Jason Matthews, one of the 2 designers for Twilight Struggle, and it's about the different countries in the Eastern Communist bloc breaking away from communism. And so one player is playing the communist player, trying to stop those countries from leaving as long as he can, while the other player, for freedom and democracy, is trying to get them to break off. And it's kind of interesting because it shifts back and forth, a very, very strong adherence to the different events that happened in 1989. I did not live in those countries in 1989. I was still a kid, and I knew a little bit about what was happening, but I've learned a lot simply from playing this game. And this game is so very well designed. It's an interesting balance. It's asymmetrical. The 2 sides are doing different things. It adds a little bit of like a battle for each country with card play and such. And I think each game will play out differently and yet still reflect what happened in history. And my number 1 game, I've mentioned it like 6 times already, and that's Twilight Struggle. Twilight Struggle takes the entire Cold War. And some people might consider this to be a war game of sorts. There are certainly wars that happen in the game or little conflicts that happen over, but at its heart, the game is political. It is about trying to exert either communistic or democratic influence throughout the world, the USSR versus the United States of America. They are there. They are not overtly attacking each other. They are doing so by taking parts in basically the whole world. Southeast Asia and South America and Central America and Cuba and the Koreas and Germany. And there's this back and forth seesawing play. The United States might have a slight advantage in the game itself, and you will definitely lose if it's your first time against someone who's played before, because the strategy is really that involved. This game took the idea of a card being multiple things. This card lets me put influence on the board. I can play this card for an actual event, and added this thing of when I play a card, it can help me, but it can also help my opponent. And this back and forth, the space race being involved, the whole thing was a very fascinating game when it came out, and it is still a powerhouse of a game. And if you like history or politics at all, certainly one you should check out. Hey, Those are my top 10 political games. What have I missed? What am I not talking about? Tell me in the comments what your favorite ones are. Until next time, I'm Tom Vasel, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.